Lanny Poffo passed away in 2023, and since then, a lot of the rumors about his life and career have finally been confirmed. From his history with steroids to always being stuck in the shadow of his famous brother, the truth about everything that held him back is now out in the open. So let's take a closer look and uncover what was really going on behind the scenes. One of the biggest challenges Lanny Poffo faced in his career was something completely out of his control. He was the younger brother of one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, Macho Man Randy Savage. And when you're standing next to someone with that level of charisma, star power, and larger-than-life personality, it's almost impossible not to get overshadowed. Lanny himself admitted many times that being Randy's brother shaped the way his career unfolded. In fact, he was very honest about the reality that both WWF and later WCW only brought him in because Randy wanted him there. Savage made it clear in his own contract negotiations that his brother had to be hired too. So yes, Lanny had steady work in the biggest companies of the wrestling world, but there was always that unshakable shadow looming over him. He wasn't just the genius or leaping Lanny. To a lot of fans and even to people in the business, he was simply Randy's brother, and that label followed him everywhere. Now, for some people, having that kind of connection would be a golden ticket. It guaranteed Lanny paychecks, exposure on national TV, and a chance to perform in front of huge audiences. But for Lanny, it was deeper than that. On one hand, he was grateful to be in the business at such a high level. On the other, he couldn't escape the feeling that he didn't fully earn it for himself. And if living in his brother's shadow wasn't already hard enough, Lanny also had his own battles to fight when it came to his body and his image. In the late 1980s, when he was being pushed in WWF with his genius character, the company expected him to look the part of a star. At the time, wrestling was filled with larger-than-life physiques, and to keep up, Lanny turned to steroids. He admitted years later that in 1989, he used them to try to get that main event look, the kind of body that would make him stand out in a locker room full of giants. But while the steroids may have helped his appearance, they left him with something much heavier: regret. Lanny never tried to sugarcoat it. He openly admitted he was ashamed of taking steroids and spoke honestly about how he wished he hadn't gone down that road. What made him different from many wrestlers of that era, though, is that he didn't just stay silent about it once his career wound down. He actually warned others against making the same mistakes he did. He talked about the dangerous and permanent side effects, and he used his own experience as an example of how chasing the perfect look could come at a very real cost. All right, let's shift the focus to Lanny's actual career, because while it's true that his brother played a huge part in getting him through the door and onto the big stage, it would be unfair to act like Lanny didn't have real talent of his own. So let's talk about what he accomplished inside the ring. His wrestling career began in 1974, and like many wrestlers of that era, his first step into the ring didn't come with much glory. His debut match was on April 16, 1974, in Atlanta, Georgia, for the All-South Wrestling Alliance. On that night, he wrestled Wayne Cowan in the opening match of the card, and he didn't win, he lost. But that's the thing about wrestling debuts. It's not really about the win or loss, it's about starting the journey. And Lanny had just started a journey that would last for decades. Despite losing that very first match, Lanny didn't let it stop him. He stuck around in the promotion, and within a few months, he began picking up some real wins. He got his revenge on Wayne Cowan in a rematch, and he even managed to score a victory over the Great Fuji, a name many wrestling fans will recognize. These early victories helped him find his footing, but the real turning point came in July 1974. On July 9th, Lanny teamed up with his father, Lanny Poffo, for the very first time. That night, they defeated the veteran tag team known as the Royal Kangaroos in Atlanta. This wasn't just another match for Lanny. It was the start of something bigger. Wrestling wasn't just a career for him, it was a family tradition, and teaming with his father gave him an early taste of what that bond in the ring could feel like. Later that same year, Lanny and Angelo moved over to Big Time Wrestling, which was one of the many promotions tied into the National Wrestling Alliance at the time. Their debut in BTW wasn't an easy one. They wrestled Lou Thez and Mighty Igor, two huge names, and lost by disqualification on November 30th, 1974, at a house show in Detroit. But that didn't matter much. What mattered was that the Poffos were now being seen by bigger crowds and working against established stars. Soon after, they began a series of matches against Bobo Brazil and Fred Curry, two beloved babyfaces, while Angelo and Lanny leaned into being heels. Angelo even wore a cap and gown to the ring, an early version of the genius gimmick Lanny would later make famous in the WWF. During this time, Lanny and his father actually managed to win the NWA World Tag Team Championship. They successfully defended the belts against teams like the Mongols and Brazil and Curry. Eventually, in 1975, they dropped the belts and moved on. But by then, Lanny had gained some very valuable experience, working night after night alongside his father in front of tough crowds. By 1976, Lanny was carving out more of an identity as a singles wrestler. He wrestled in Big Time Wrestling, the NWA Western States Territory, and the famous St. Louis Wrestling Club. On May 29, 1976, he had one of his first real big moments when he got a shot at the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. On the legendary Wrestling at the Chase TV show, he wrestled Terry Funk, one of the most respected champions of that era. Lanny lost, but the fact that he was in that spot meant people were starting to see potential in him. That summer in July 1976, Lanny made another big move by heading to Jim Crockett's Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. This was important because it was the first time he began regularly teaming with his brother Randy, who was also breaking into the business. The Poffo brothers hit the house show circuit together. For the rest of the year, Lanny got to share the ring with his brother, and this helped them both grow as performers. By early 1977, though, Randy left Mid-Atlantic and Lanny went back to singles competition. Then, in February 1978, he once again got a crack at the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, this time against Harley Race in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Unlike his match with Terry Funk, this one didn't end in a loss. It ended in a draw. Going the distance with a world champion like Harley Race was a major accomplishment for any wrestler at that time. In April 1978, Lanny traveled north to Canada and joined Emile Dupre's Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. This promotion ran shows almost every day across the maritime provinces and had its own TV spot, so Lanny was getting regular exposure. That same year, he became the very first AGPW International Heavyweight Champion, making history for the promotion. On May 23, 1978, fans were treated to something they had never seen before. Lanny wrestling his own brother, now going by the name Randy Savage. Lanny won the match by disqualification. But the bigger story was that two brothers were now beginning a rivalry that would carry through the territory. Savage eventually beat Lanny for the title, and they traded it back and forth during 1978 and 1979. Their final title match ended in a draw, showing how evenly matched they were. By late 1979, Lanny was back in the United States, this time with Pacific Northwest Wrestling, an NWA affiliate in Portland. He even got a shot at Roddy Piper's NWA Pacific Northwest Heavyweight Championship in February 1979, though he came up short. After a tough loss to Gene Kiniski the following month, he left the territory. Meanwhile, back home, his father Angelo had started his own promotion in 1978, International Championship Wrestling. This was considered an outlaw promotion because it ran against established NWA territories. Angelo built it up by signing talent away from other groups and making it a real competitor. Naturally, both Randy and Lanny became stars there. Lanny was one of the cornerstones of ICW and even became its heavyweight champion. Over the next 6 years, the ICW heavyweight title was basically controlled by either Lanny, Randy, or Paul Christie. The Poffo brothers dominated the promotion until it finally shut down in 1984. As ICW began to collapse, Lanny started appearing in other territories. In October 1983, he wrestled in Bill Watts's Mid-South Wrestling, beating Art Cruz and Doug Vines at a TV taping in Shreveport. A couple of months later, he teamed up with a young Rick Rude to face the Midnight Express in a series of matches. He later went back to singles competition and wrestled Buddy Landel several times. By mid-1984, Lanny followed Randy into the Continental Wrestling Association in Memphis. Their first win there was on June 18th, when they defeated Bart Batten and Johnny Wilhoit. Almost immediately, they began feuding with the Rock and Roll Express, which was one of the hottest tag teams in wrestling at that time. Lanny also challenged Eddie Gilbert for the CWA International Heavyweight Championship. They also wrestled the Fabulous Ones, another legendary tag team, but weren't able to capture the belts. When Lanny Poffo first walked into the World Wrestling Federation in 1985, it was a huge moment for him. On June 21st of that year, he made his official debut at the legendary Madison Square Garden, where he defeated Terry Gibbs. It's worth pointing out how special that was, because not every wrestler gets the chance to debut at such an iconic arena. It instantly gave him credibility, and fans started to take notice of this new face. Around the same time, his brother Randy Savage was also stepping into WWF, though interestingly, the company never once acknowledged on screen that they were related. In the wrestling world, families are often part of the story, but in this case, WWF kept them separate. Maybe because they didn't want Randy's spotlight shared, or maybe because they wanted Lanny to stand on his own. At first, Lanny didn't play a villain. Instead, he came in as a babyface, someone fans could cheer for. He introduced a very unique gimmick as Leaping Lanny Poffo. Unlike the larger, more intense wrestlers of the time, Lanny brought frisbees to the ring. But these weren't just frisbees. Each one had a poem he had written himself. He would read the poem out loud before his match, usually poking fun at the heel he was about to face, or hyping up the fan-favorite wrestlers that the heel was feuding with. Then after finishing his poem, he tossed the frisbees out to the crowd as souvenirs. It was something lighthearted and creative, and it gave Lanny a special connection with the fans. He wasn't just another guy in tights. He had personality, he had charm, and he had something fans could remember. In his first few months in WWF, Lanny actually did really well. He went undefeated for a stretch. Soon after, he started taking losses to big names like Jesse Ventura, Big John Studd, and The Missing Link. Even though he wasn't being pushed as a main eventer, Lanny's matches were different from most of the so-called jobbers of the era. Enhancement talent back then often lost quickly and without getting much offense in. But Lanny broke that mold. He actually got to show off his athletic, high-flying style in matches, and fans noticed. He brought moves that were rare in North America at the time, like the senton bomb and the moonsault. This was years before high-flying moves became common in American wrestling, which made Lanny stand out as an innovator. He even got some notable TV spots early on. On October 5th, 1985, he appeared at Saturday Night's Main Event, reading a poem during the wedding of Uncle Elmer. It wasn't a match, but it kept him in the spotlight. Moving into 1986, he kept picking up wins against lower-card wrestlers like Terry Gibbs, Tiger Chung Lee, and S.D. Jones. That became the pattern of his early WWF career. Strong wins at house shows and against smaller names, but struggling against the bigger stars who were being groomed for main events. Still, Lanny made sure to keep fans entertained, even in unusual situations. In late 1986 and early 1987, he competed in a series of bunkhouse battle royals while wearing full knight's armor. It was strange, funny, and memorable. Exactly the kind of thing people would talk about afterward. He was also part of a big moment at Saturday Night's Main Event in 1987 when Andre the Giant, newly turned heel, headbutted him during a battle royal. The headbutt caught Lanny on the nose and busted him open badly. He bled all over the floor and had to be stretchered out. It wasn't planned that way, but it showed how dangerous the ring could be, especially against a giant like Andre. In February 1987, he got involved in another storyline moment during a six-man tag match with the Can-Am Connection against Adrian Adonis in the Dream Team. During that match, Adonis accidentally cut the hair of Brutus Beefcake, which led to Beefcake's famous transformation into the Barber. Lanny may not have been the star of that angle, but he was right there in the middle of it when it happened. By 1988, Lanny was still floating around the mid-card. He scored some surprising wins like defeating Sika the Savage Samoan and had house show feuds with guys like Dan Spivey and Dangerous Danny Davis. He even went on a long winning streak against preliminary wrestlers toward the end of the year. But no matter how many wins he picked up, he wasn't being elevated into the big storylines. Then came 1989, and everything changed. On March 18th of that year, Lanny turned heel for the first time in his WWF career. In Boston, he cut a scathing poem where he insulted the city's sports teams. The crowd hated it, and just like that, the genius was born. Gone was the light-hearted frisbee-tossing poet. In his place was a smug, arrogant intellectual who wore a cap and gown to the ring, ridiculed fan favorites, and strutted around with a flamboyant style reminiscent of Gorgeous George. It was a perfect heel character because it played off Lanny's natural intelligence and his love for poetry, but twisted it into something cocky and annoying. As the genius, Lanny finally started getting some bigger opportunities, and even aligned himself with Mr. Perfect as his executive consultant. The partnership gave him a bigger spotlight, and soon he was in storylines with the top names in the company. The biggest moment of his career came on November 5th, 1989, at Saturday Night's Main Event. That night, the genius actually scored a win over Hulk Hogan, something very few people can say. Thanks to interference from Mr. Perfect, Hogan was counted out, and the genius walked away with the victory. Even though it wasn't clean, it was still historic. Hogan hadn't lost on WWF television in nearly 2 years, and Lanny was the man standing tall that night. The genius kept busy into 1990, even appearing at the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania 6, where Brutus Beefcake cut his hair as part of their feud. But by the summer of 1990, his push slowed down. He lost his feud with Beefcake, started putting over other wrestlers like Koko B. Ware, and drifted back down the card. By late 1991, he was mostly managing the Beverly Brothers rather than wrestling himself. He stayed in that role until the end of 1992 when WWF released him. And with that, we wrap things up. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Lanny Poffo's story, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more wrestling stories like this.